Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And thank you for being here in such large numbers. I am Joe Morelli, member of the United States Congress from Rochester's 25th District. Thank you. Let me begin by thanking Governor Cuomo and Lieutenant Governor Hochul for being with us today and for their continued partnership and their strong dedication to supporting the needs of our community. Governor Cuomo, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. And let me take a moment to acknowledge the many other elected officials and our partners who have joined us today. First of all, they'll be joining us here at the podium as part of the program, but let me acknowledge again the Governor's Director of Emergency Management, Michael Copey, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Commissioner Basil Sagos, New York State Budget Director Rob Mujica, Empire State Development Executive Vice President Real Estate Holly Light, and of course Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, who will be announcing our breakout sessions at the end of the speaking program here at the podium. I do also want to acknowledge, first of all, thank the Governor for giving me a chance to spend a little time with my former colleagues in the state legislature. I always like an excuse to do it. I know that we're here joined by Rich Funke, member of the New York State Senate. The recovering Rich Funke, I should say. Also from the Senate, Tom O'Mara, Bob Ort, Patty Ritchie, and Joe Robach. Please give them all a hand. And from the People's House, we're joined by a number of Assembly members, Will Barkley, Steve Hawley, Mark Johns, Peter Lawrence, Brian Manctalo, Angelo Morinello, Michael Norris, Jamie Romeo, and Mark Walczyk. Please give them all a round of applause. Great to see all of them. Springtime should be about planting gardens and playing baseball. But unfortunately, our community and neighboring towns along the waterfront have a new tradition of putting up sandbags and break walls instead. Lake Ontario has reached its record high levels, nearly an inch over the highest levels in 2017, that has eroded beaches, devastated family homes, and crippled lakeside businesses. This year, we have already felt similar impacts. Summer businesses can't open their doors. School buses can't drop off children due to flooded streets. And we continue to brace for these floodwaters to get even worse. I was proud to work with my state legislative colleagues when I was Majority Leader of the Assembly to appropriate $45 million in 2017, working along with the Governor and his staff to deal with the effects of the flooding in 2017. But it is clear that we can no longer afford to wait and simply react. We need to take proactive steps to adjust to the new reality of changing weather patterns and invest in long-term planning and mitigation efforts. I'm proud that this week the House of Representatives will begin considering appropriations to fund the Army Corps of Engineers Resiliency Study to produce recommendations on an infrastructure investment strategy for coastal communities like ours. Unfortunately, the next flooding event or natural disaster is not a matter of if, but when. The Army Corps will be essential to helping our region withstand, recover, and adapt to these weather-related events. But thankfully, we have a governor who recognizes that need and is taking immediate steps to strengthen the resiliency of Great Lakes communities. I've been proud for many, many years to call Andrew Cuomo a friend. I'm equally proud to have him as a partner in government. He has consistently gone to bat for our region. He is here on days when we face crisis, whether it's windstorms or flooding. He has been there. He's been here in person. He's directed troops. He is an extraordinary leader. He is someone who has never forgotten the needs of upstate New York and certainly never forgotten the needs of Monroe County and this community. Again, a dear friend. I'm proud to serve with him. I'm proud to call him to the stage. Please join me in welcoming the great governor of the state of New York, Andrew M. Cuomo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for being here today. I know many of you had to travel a long distance to be here. We tried to pick a point that was equidistant, but when you're talking about 400 miles of affected shoreline, even equidistant is a long way. So thank you all very much for taking the time to be with us today. Thank the Rochester Civic Center for hosting us. And first to my friend Joe Morelli. We miss him in Albany. He was there for many years. I miss him on a personal level. He's one of the really outstanding public servants. He's in the business for the right reasons. He's there to get things done. He left us behind. He moved up. We were just a rung on the ladder as he moved up to Washington. He sends a postcard once in a while, and that's nice. Waves from high above, that Washington wave. You ever notice how they wave? That little, they move the hand a little bit, like they don't have to do a full wave because they're federal officials, so they just do a little wave. But he's never forgotten where he's come from, and he's going to be helpful to us here. We need the federal government to pay attention and be responsive. The IJC is a fundamental federal creature. It is not a state creature. And this is a massive undertaking that we are about to embark on. And we need federal funding. They've been talking about an infrastructure plan in Washington since I was 17. There's been a number of infrastructure plans that have been floating around now. But this is a critical infrastructure need, and we need federal funds. We're not going to wait for them, because waiting for the federal government is not what New York State does. But we need federal assistance, and I know Joe Morelli is going to spearhead that effort for us. Let's give him a big round of applause. This is an unprecedented effort in northern New York. We've only done something like this a couple of times before, normally in response to major disasters, which happen to be in downstate New York, in the Hudson Valley, but we've never had this situation in northern New York before. And this is an all hands on deck. I've been working with my colleagues in the legislature in Albany. We've been talking about it. We've been planning. What can we do? How can we do it? And they're all here today, and I want to thank them for their collegiality, for their creativity. This is thinking outside the box. This is not what government normally does. It's not about passing a budget. It's how do you deal with a situation that you've never seen before? How do you deal with a situation where there is no precedent, there is no example? And it really calls for elected officials to step up, and they have. I'm going to ask them to stand, and let's give them all a round of applause. Stand up. We also have all the relevant commissioners who are here. These task force of commissioners will be working with communities all across the affected area. They're not just here today. You'll be seeing them over the coming months, working with your local community on how to help. So today, there'll be breakout sessions, et cetera, but part of it is get to know them, get their phone number, get their home number, and get their cell phone number. The budget director does not like to give out his cell phone number because he has the money and many people call him. His home number is 917-426-5400. Call him any time of the day or night. Robert Mejica. But let me just point them out again. We have the Environmental Commissioner Basil Sagos, who you'll hear from. We have the Parks Commissioner Eric Kulaside. We have the CEO of the New York Power Authority, which is very important, Gil Quinones. We have the Transportation Commissioner Marie-Therese Dominguez. We have the General Services Administrator Rowan DeStito, Labor Commissioner Roberta Reardon, Department of State Head Rosanna Rosado, Housing Commissioner Ruth Ann Wisnauskas, and heading the team, we have the great Kathy Hochul. Let's give her a round of applause. And you'll also hear from Holly Light from the Empire State Development Company. We're trying to do a few different things here. We have a major challenge ahead of us. I don't believe in living in the state of denial, right? It's all too often to deny a problem. Because if you deny the problem, then you don't have to solve it. It's not a life strategy. It's not a government strategy. We could say, well, this is a 1 in 100 year flood. That's what they say to me every disaster. Except it happens about 10 times a year. This is a 1 in a 100 year flood. We could say this is not our problem. It's that IJC and let them handle it. We could say, well, this is not our problem. It's 400 miles of shoreline. We can't deal with it. It's Joe Morelli's problem. And those Congress people in Washington, this is all a federal problem. Which, by the way, I say from time to time when I'm mad at Joe Morelli. We could say all of those things. But that's not who we are. And that's not what New York is all about. And that's not what made New York, New York. This state did not become the greatest state in the nation because we denied problems. It did not become the greatest state in the nation because we shied away from challenges. It became the greatest state in the nation for the exact opposite reason. We saw the challenge, and we said we're going to face up to it, and we're going to take it on, and we're not going to wait, and we're not going to sit back. And that's a moment in time that we are at today. We know, if we're not in the state of denial, that this situation with Lake Ontario is not a once in a lifetime or a twice in a lifetime or a 3 time in a lifetime. Joe was right. We know the question is now not if it happens again, but when it happens again. We were exactly here just 2 years ago. Just 2 years ago. Well, why? Well, I believe the IJC's management is part of it. I also believe it's Mother Nature. It is, as the IJC says, more snowpack that melts faster. It's more rain. It's more wet. And these are factors that are not going to change. You are seeing extreme weather patterns all across the globe. This is not Lake Ontario, right? We see more tornadoes in New York and floods in New York and hurricanes in New York. We see wildfires in California. We see floods all around the globe. This is our part of dealing now with extreme weather. And that's where we are. And I don't want to be on the defense. I don't want to just wait for the emergency to happen and then we respond to the emergency. Let's figure out a proactive strategy to get ahead of it and actually improve upon it. Now, why all these legislators? Why all these commissioners all in one place? Because this is going to be an unprecedented action. It's going to take total partnership. It's going to take creativity. It's going to take everyone working together. It's going to take us pushing the envelope. It's going to take significant resources. And I want you to know that in this unprecedented effort, the state of New York is behind you, and we're going to commit up to $300 million to do the kind of resiliency and economic development work that we have to do. Now, when they say, wow, you're spending $300 million, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. And I don't like to spend money. My friends in the legislature sometimes say I'm cheap. I'm a little cheap, I'll tell you the truth. My daughters will tell you I'm very cheap, and they would happen to be right. But we've been working to reduce taxes, lower taxes all across the board, keep government spending at record low levels, which we have. But I don't want to spend $100 million every time there's an emergency and rebuild what was where it was, like we did in 2017, $100 million. And you know what happens when we have a significant flood here again? we're going to destroy what we just built in 2017 with our $100 million. I would rather invest more and build it back better, more resilient, more economic development potential, so we're actually not wasting 100, we're investing 300. And that's what today is all about. Outside the box, yes, it's about the environment, and it's about resiliency, that new word that everybody talks about, which Basil Sagos will talk to you about. It's also about economic development. And a lot of these places needed economic development anyway. Oswego needed economic development anyway. Sodas Point had more potential than we're using. Alcott and Newfane had more potential. Many communities along this 400-mile stretch had economic development potential that we have not exploited. And we're saying now is the time to do it. Let's make it more resilient. Let's make it more cost-effective long-term, but let's also make the improvements that we haven't made in decades, because that is inarguable and it makes sense. So we have a four-prong agenda. First, you have to deal with the emergency situation that we're facing. And you'll hear from Mike Copey, who's head of emergency service. He does a fantastic job. Unfortunately, we've had more experience in dealing with emergencies than any administration in history. My father was governor for 12 years. The emergencies he dealt with, much snowfall on the thruway. It was one phone call, close the thruway. That's it. We went right back to the ball game. The whole thing took 7 minutes. That's not what this is anymore. These are storms, floods, it's life-threatening. It's 7 feet of snow in Buffalo, which even Buffalo never got 7 feet of snow before. It's Superstorm Sandy down in New York City, which wiped out communities and caused us to take bold action that we never took before. And like Ontario's situation is very much like that. Look at what we did after Superstorm Sandy. We knew that, again, it was not if but when. We bought out hundreds of homes after Hurricane Sandy, people who just said, I don't want to be here because I'm afraid it's going to come back. We rebuilt the electrical grid and raised the whole electrical grid so the next time there was a flood, the electrical grid and the transformers wouldn't get wet again. We rebuilt water treatment facilities because the water treatment facilities became overwhelmed with the water and just failed to function, to put it nicely, in this morning hour. We rebuilt roads, we changed telephone poles, we changed wires. We anticipated this situation in the future, and we dealt with it. And that's what we have to do here, that type of bold, creative thinking. So first, it's emergencies. Mike Copey's going to talk to you. They're talking about an increase in weather and wind. We're already at flood levels. We've been lulled into a false sense of security. Well, we're at flood level, but nothing happened. Oh, yeah? Wait till Mother Nature kicks up the wind, and then you tell me what happened. Wait till there's a little bit more rain, and then tell me what happens. The only way to prepare for an emergency is before it. After it happens, it is too late. Believe me, I have been there. Sandbags, pumps, aqua dam, resources, vehicles to evacuate people. That has to be put in place first. We have the most sophisticated emergency services operation I believe the state has ever had, and I believe the most sophisticated operation any state in the nation has, he says as an arrogant New Yorker. But it's only as good as the information we get. We need to hear from the county executives and from the mayors and from the supervisors. Tell us what you need before you need it. Don't call us after the storm starts and says, oh, by the way, I need this. We can't even get to you at that point. So Mike Copey is going to talk to you about that. We need the local partnership to make that happen. Second, it is the IJC. It is the IJC. The IJC is a federal body that was put in place to balance the needs between this country and Canada and deal with the Great Lakes, which were obviously multi-jurisdictional. It is not working. It is not working. They came up with a new plan in 2014. The plan in 1958 was better. This did not happen before. And when you read the history of the IJC that goes back to the 1900s, not only were they supposed to balance, they were responsible for the mitigation of the water and potential damage. I called up Senator Ort a couple of weeks ago and I said, Senator Ort, I think we should look at the legal liability of the IJC because I think there may be a potential legal case here. Okay, it didn't happen that way. Senator Ort called me and said, I think there may be, but Senator Ort is right. And we sent a letter to the IJC that lays out the history, lays out the legality, and frankly says if they don't do something, we're going to sue them. Now, I don't like to do that. People say, oh, you're harsh to the poor IJC. I don't think I'm harsh to the poor IJC. I think the IJC is harsh to the people in New York State who've been suffering along the shoreline of Lake Ontario. That's what I call harsh. Saying to people who just went through a flood in 2017, whoops, we're going to do it again 2 years later. That, I think, is harsh. Not being financially responsible for the damage that they do, that, I think, is harsh. Not being responsive and fair to the needs of New Yorkers, that, I think, is harsh. And my job is very simple. I get paid to do one thing, represent and protect the people of the state of New York. And I do that 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And if that IJC does not respond to us, we will sue the IJC. And they're going to know how serious we are. Third area of this four-pronged approach is resiliency. There's no doubt we need more resiliency along the shoreline. There's no doubt that we know the areas that flood because we saw the flooding in 2017. We're going to do studies. Yes, studies are always nice. I love studies. I like action better than studies. And here we know the areas that are going to flood because we ran the experiment in 2017. What happens when Lake Ontario reaches extreme flood levels and the wind comes from the northwest? We know where the water's coming. You can go to the individual homes. We know what homes we rebuilt after 2017. I've been working with local leaders. They take me right to the point, and they say the water's going to come right here. That was the study, 2017. How do we start to put resiliency measures in place, not temporary sandbags, aquadam, et cetera, real resiliency that we can do and we can do in our lifetime, where we don't have to go through federal approval. All due respect, Joe, I don't mean any disrespect. A little disrespect, I mean to the federal government, but not to you. What can we do, and we can do quickly with the DEC to make the shoreline more resilient in a way that's not just manufactured for an emergency, but long-term? The fourth piece is if we're going to spend this money, and if we're going to do this kind of work, how do we increase the economic development potential of these communities that we are improving? Because resiliency and economic development should go hand in glove. We don't think of it that way. But this is all new, my friends. We haven't been here before. How do you put resiliency together with economic development? If we're going to make the Port of Oswego more resilient, how do we also improve the port so it is more economically attractive? We get more people coming to fish. We get more tourists coming to walk along the waterfront, because the waterfront is a great magnet, right, for economic development. All across the country, the waterfront is always the magnet. People are drawn to the water. And we have, on Lake Ontario, the most beautiful natural resource. We haven't had the facilities to keep up with it. So how do we make those areas economic development centers? And Holly Light is going to speak to this, and Robert Mejica. And listen to Robert Mejica, because he's the budget director and he has the money again. And this is not about love. This is about money today. How do you make those areas better boating, better fishing, better tourism, better downtown corridors, better day trips for tourists? How do you make them economic development hubs while we are doing the resiliency? Last point is this. When I was speaking to my colleagues in the legislature, who have taken on many big challenges, because government is harder today than it's ever been. I've been in government and around government all my life. Government is now asked to do things that it never did before. You know, I look back fondly on the days with my father where it was that one phone call. Close the thruway. Great, Governor. Executive action. These are big challenges. And they have always risen to the occasion. And this is not going to be easy, what we're talking about here today. No one has done this. No state has done this on the level that we must do this. And it's going to require local communities to really get creative. How do you want to redo Sodas Point? How do you want to redo Newfane? What's your vision? Do the community participation process so the community is involved and engaged. How do you put resiliency together with economic development? The state will provide planners to every community at state expense. We will provide technical assistance for every community at state expense. The commissioners will be in your communities working with you to do these plans. We'll find the funding out of the state budget. But this is all going to be hard. And we have to do it fast. I'm not talking 4, 5, 7-year study. We don't have 4 or 5 years. We can't do this every 2 years. We don't have the funding to rebuild everything every 2 years. So we need a real plan of action, literally in a matter of months, that can actually be deployed and made a reality in 1, 2, 3 years. That's what we're talking about. Now, for government, that's like lightning, right? Nothing happened. You can't fill out a state form. It takes you a year. I know. We have to get out of that mindset and get out of that operational mentality. We have to do this right. We have to do it fast. And maybe it's intimidating to some. And speaking with the legislators and speaking with the commissioners, everybody said, wow, it's right, but it's hard. Last point, think back on the great things that we did. Everything was hard. Everything was hard. There are none of the great things that we did in New York where they said, oh, that's going to be easy. DeWitt Clinton, let's build the Erie Canal. We go from the Hudson River and we go to the Great Lakes, and that's going to make us the state that's the port. Great, that's a great idea, DeWitt Clinton. One little detail. When you get to the Hudson, I get it, you come in New York City, you go up the Hudson, you make a left at Albany, and then you come out of Buffalo. One detail, when you make the left in the boat at Albany, how do you get to Erie? Oh, don't worry, we're going to build a canal. Oh, really? How do we do that? Well, 524 miles. We just dig a canal. They dug a canal. New York City subway system, early 1900s, 600 miles of subway track built underground. Robert Moses wanted to build a great beach on Long Island. He had a vision for the Jones Beach, greatest beach built in the nation for the public. 7 miles long on the Long Island shore. Beautiful. State didn't own the land. Little problem. Had to go get a referendum from the local towns. Failed. Came back. Got the referendum passed again the next year. Another problem. There was no beach on the shore of Long Island. It was all marshland. He said, no problem. We will dredge and provide sand and make the beach 14 feet high of sand for 7 miles to fill in the marsh to create a beach. Where do you get the sand? We'll dredge a canal, but we don't need a canal. Well, now we do, and we're going to dredge a canal, and we're going to build the beach. We just did the Tappan Zee Bridge. Impossible to do the Tappan Zee Bridge. Went between Westchester and Rockland. They talked about it for 20 years. Nothing ever happened. And this was a scary bridge, this bridge. This bridge, literally, they would talk about it collapsing, and then they would tell you to continue to drive over it, which is always a mixed message that gives you a problem. You know, I used to drive across the Tappan Zee Bridge. I would take off my seatbelt. I was ready. I'd open the window. I was like ice road truckers. Like, I'm ready to jump out, and before the car hits, it was traumatic, and it went on for years. And we said we're going to replace the Tappan Zee Bridge, and we're going to do it in 4 years. And we're going to do it on time and on budget. And everybody said, oh, government can't do that. You can't build a bridge. 4 years on time, on budget? 4 years on time, on budget. There's a beautiful new bridge when you go down south. We are capable of great things. We've always been capable of great things. We have a history of doing great things. Not the easy things, the great things. And that's why we are the great state of New York, the great empire state of New York, because we do great things. And this is another great thing, that we don't have the option of deciding whether or not to do it. We have to do it. We have to do it, because our future depends on it. And the future of your community depends on it. And whether or not your children stay and raise their family here, whether or not tourism continues and economic development continues, we have no choice. We have to do it, and we will do it together. Thank you, and God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Director of Emergency Management, Michael Tovey.
Good morning. I had just a few notes here. Let me just fix this. It's impossible to follow the governor in terms of speaking. He's so perfect. Plus, he's much taller. I got to pull a stool out here. But for those I have not met, my name is Michael Copey. I am the Governor's Director of Emergency Management. I'd like to begin first by thanking everyone for their partnership and incredible work thus far as we deal with the flooding conditions caused by the historic levels of water in the lake. When we compare what we are facing today to what we experienced in 2017, there are clearly a number of similarities, whether that be record lake levels, people being forced from their homes, or the devastation of key economic engines in communities all along the shoreline. However, one thing which has been undeniably different, and I think you will all agree, has been our collective preparedness. This time around, the state and all of our partners at the local level began to start planning and putting assets in the field weeks ahead of time. And thanks to the hard work and coordination of our local partners, county emergency managers, and the state workforce, we have been able to deploy over 1.3 million sandbags to date, more than 400 pumps, and thousands of feet of water barrier, as well as shift these and other assets throughout the 8 counties along the shoreline in order to adapt to changing conditions as they arise. Now, clearly, our activities alone cannot prevent or solve all the problems caused by this flooding. But I know that together, we have been able to put communities in a better position to withstand the flooding and the wave action and minimize the damage caused. That's not to say that everything is fine, because as we know, it is not. But with the governor's establishment of this REDI Commission, we will begin to look at implementing long-term solutions that will bolster the effectiveness of our short-term emergency management operations the next time this happens. And yes, sadly, we do need to start looking at this as a problem that will be ongoing, because until those responsible for managing the water levels start doing a better job, we have to consider this as the new normal. Seeing such a tremendous turnout today is really encouraging. Hopefully we can hit the ground running and get some of these long-term solutions moving forward. Finally, as many of you know, we have another storm which will hit most of the lake tonight and tomorrow. The current predictions, unfortunately, are for wind speeds of up to 30 miles per hour from the west and the north. We know what that's going to do. It will create waves up to 8 foot high in certain areas. We are prepared for this storm, as we will be for future weather events. And I want to reiterate one key point that I've made to many of you in my visits to the 8 counties. We are with you as partners for the long haul. We will be here until the water recedes and the storms stop. If you continue to need any support from the state, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we will get you what you need. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you as this process continues.
Please welcome Commissioner of Environmental and Environmental Conservation, Lisa Samuels.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mike, for leaving the stool pushed out for me. Mike's done an incredible job. I mean, in my now 8 years with the governor, this has been one of the best rollouts of an emergency preparedness, and some of the work that our agencies have done in concert together. It's really been seamless and working well, of course, with all of you. Well, we DEC here, we've been a partner with all of you on the lake for 40-some years. We've achieved great things over that time. Water quality is better than ever. Some of the fishing is better than ever now. But you obviously have an incredible situation with storm levels and the new normal that we're all contending with. We were a strong partner in 2017 when these storms first hit and these floods first came to this region. We issued a general permit, and really within a matter of days, we're able to push out 3,000 permits now to communities and residences for individual work. We're doing that again this year. We have a new general permit 2019 to enable some of that quick action to rebuild. But as the governor has stated many times and eloquently today, this is the new normal, and we just cannot rebuild to old standards. We have to build to the future. And we must employ all the tools in the toolbox. It's not just hard infrastructure. It's not just soft infrastructure like wetlands and beaches. It's all of it integrated into a plan. And And we've detailed both here today and over the last few weeks some of the things that we will begin looking at in concert with you. So it's the critical public infrastructure, wastewater, infrastructure, the intakes at drinking water plants, the marinas and shorefront ports who now are having trouble operating. Some of them can't operate in shallow water either and may need to have some dredging. Some of the areas along the waterfront that have experienced incredible erosion. So how do we make those natural areas more resilient as well? Because those areas, in fact, can do a great deal to absorb wave and wind action and obviously the high waters as well. We know this approach works. The governor mentioned Superstorm Sandy. I mean, Superstorm Sandy was this problem at a grand scale, obviously across a large shoreline to the south. But we, over the course of many months, put together a plan using hard and soft infrastructure to be able to create a more resilient shoreline where places like Staten Island and Long Island were subject to that incredible storm surge. So we know it works well there. We're doing it at a smaller scale in Utica on the Sequoia Creek, which floods all the time. And there we're carving into the mountainside and creating a flood bench and natural wetland area to absorb some of those flows. In Braddock Bay, we're in the middle of a project right now that is opening up a dense cattail marsh and also creating a living shoreline barrier to absorb, again, that wave action and keep sediment out of chipping channels and boat basins. And it's also working, of course, elsewhere on the Great Lakes, like Presque Isle State Park in Pennsylvania, where they've created this barrier off the coast. The process ahead, you're going to hear a lot about that today in your breakout sessions. This is a sprint to the finish, right? This is a sprint to Labor Day. But the process will continue, obviously, much beyond that at the state level. A few points. Today is when it begins. We go into our breakout sessions. We begin engaging with you all on your needs, your desires for your community, your vision for your community. We have a fantastic team here. The commissioners and all of the great staff at all the agencies, many of whom are in the room here with us, are ready to do this with you in a very well-organized process. We have a fantastic contractor who now has joined us. This contractor, O'Brien & Gear, we have Jim Fox, actually the president of O'Brien & Gear here. I want to thank them for what they've been able to pull together in a week. And we've worked with them very well in the past in such rollouts as the Harmful Algal Bloom Summit. Some of you may remember that. So this is a very doable sort of state and consultant approach. The regional teams are then going to begin scheduling tours of the communities. We've seen many of these communities firsthand, but we want to make sure all the staffs and all the teams as units begin moving within the communities and feeling out all the various problems. Developing a community needs assessment, and then begin putting priorities on projects as you develop them, as this comes up to us. And of course, all of this sprint, or it's a sprint marathon, or whatever you want to call it, it's a record-setting pace to Labor Day when we submit the full commission report to the governor and his staff. So we know this works. We know this bottom-up approach works. Top-down never works well. Bottom-up always works well when you provide resources above. So that's the goal here, is to provide expert resources to you all to help you all get through the process of explaining what you want, calculating all of it, and putting it into a vision that ultimately will protect this incredible shoreline. Because this really is what drives the economy in the St. Lawrence and Lake Ontario region. It's the water. People want to see a resilient shoreline. The economy needs it. So I want to thank you all for being here, and thank my agency partners and all the friends in the room. We'll get this done. Thank you.
Please welcome State Budget Director Robert Colby.
Good morning. So last week when the governor announced the REDI Commission, he wanted to refocus our recovery efforts on a strategy that capitalizes on what we do best. We've taken a ground-up approach that has worked in rebuilding our economic development efforts across the state, using the regional councils and the downtown revitalization initiatives, understanding that communities know best how to invest in their communities and their needs. So we're now going to take that same approach here. Our best partners have been the community leaders the local people in helping us understand what they need. And we're going to use them, combined with the state experts, to help us improve the affected waterfront areas, find long-term solutions, and create economic development and resilience to bring more visitors and more businesses to these communities. The governor highlighted the important economic development projects that the state has funded in your region, but we clearly still have to do more. And we will, in light of the pattern of annual flooding that we're seeing, and rather than rebuilding what was there before, we're going to rebuild it better, stronger, more resilient than ever before. We want to see these communities prosper into the future and through the lens of economic development opportunities for the communities. The governor has rightly dubbed Tropical Storms Lee and Irene, Superstorm Sandy, the flooding of Lake Ontario as the new normal, because it is undeniable that these storms are recurring more and more often, and the flooding is becoming more powerful and more frequent. We as New Yorkers have been resilient. We rebuilt after each one of these disasters, and we helped our friends and our neighbors, because when the rug is pulled out from under us, we stand up and we brush ourselves off, and we have recovered, and we will continue to do it together. But New Yorkers don't just put their heads in the sand. When we are faced with the reality that no matter how uncomfortable it is, we know that many of the same communities that were flooded before, only 2 years ago, are now being flooded again 2 years later. In 2017, the governor committed $100 million to fund repairs along the shoreline, rebuild homes and properties in the 8 counties that surrounded Lake Ontario that were impacted in 2017. And we've already spent millions of those dollars, and some of that is actually being damaged again, and we're going to have to rebuild again. So as the governor recently said, it's a fool's errand to continue to rebuild in the same standard, only to have the high lake levels destroy the progress that we have made. So to rebuild the shoreline and rebuild the businesses better than ever before, we will invest up to $300 million. Over the next few months, the Commission will work with your communities to develop projects that will protect the waterfront and encourage sustainable economic growth for each of the communities, for those who live and work right here along the shores of one of the most beautiful spots on the planet that we happen to have in our great state of New York. As the governor mentioned, up to $300 million is going to be used to implement priority projects that are identified by the REDI Commission. Over the next 12 weeks, there will be at least 4 meetings in each of the communities, and the REDI planning teams will tour the impacted areas, evaluate assets, identify risks, and then identify projects for funding with the local communities. The projects will be submitted in September for state review, and so that there is commitment from the local governments, we will require a 15% local match from each of the communities in order to be eligible for state funding. So that's the concept, and we look forward to hitting the ground running in this partnership with all of you. Thank you.
Please welcome Executive Vice President of Real Estate Development Planning, Holly Love.
Good morning. As the governor has said, we did not think we would be here. We thought the flooding of Lake Ontario in 2017 would be once in a lifetime, something we never experienced before and wouldn't again. Yet here we are, facing even higher water levels in the region than we saw 2 years ago. After the 2017 flooding, as Robert just talked about, the governor established the Lake Ontario Small Business Recovery Fund, which ESD administered. The program provided grants to small businesses, not-for-profits, farms, and homeowners associations impacted by that historic flooding. More than $6 million has already been committed to 150 applicants through that program. Unfortunately, past disasters show that 90% of small businesses fail within a year of a disaster unless they can resume operations within 5 days of the event, which is extremely difficult even when you have programs like the one the state stood up in 2017. Like many households, Many businesses are just one large expense away from insolvency. And the impact of those lost businesses on families, we all know, but it also has a huge impact on the state economy. As the governor mentioned, we can't overlook the many recent economic success stories in Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River communities. REDC, the DRI, and URI projects are attracting tourism and generating economic activity throughout these regions. In the North Country, the REDC leveraged $23 million in public and private investment in the Thousand Islands Harbor Hotel to redevelop a former brownfield site into a world-class destination. In central New York, construction's underway on another former brownfield to make the Harborview Square a $26.2 million mixed-income, mixed-use housing development in downtown Oswego. The development is part of the state's downtown revitalization initiative and is being constructed as we speak. Finger Lakes Forward has been the moniker for the momentum in this region for a reason. Attracting people to the region to live, work, and play can't happen without the infrastructure to support economic growth and prosperity. In 2018, Governor Cuomo announced the completion of a $79.4 million project to modernize the Greater Rochester International Airport. Building upon New York State's record investments in revitalizing upstate New York's economy, the airport's enhancements, both inside and out, will spur tourism and business growth and continue the region's progress. Additionally, right here along the shores of Lake Ontario, $5.8 million in improvements and upgraded infrastructure and pavement quality along this section of the parkway will smooth the way for area travelers. And in Western New York, the REDC has focused investments along the waterfront from the Niagara River up north to Lake Ontario with an emphasis on tourism, an industry that supports more than 70,000 jobs and brings 9 million visitors, spending over $3 billion per year to the region. Under Governor Cuomo, $172 million in public and private developments in downtown Niagara Falls has been completed, with another $264 million in projects underway and proposed. Extending north through Niagara County, the state's invested $75 million in the removal of the Niagara Scenic Parkway to reconnect people to their waterfront. The Discover Niagara Shuttle, which has received funding through USA Niagara, transports visitors from Niagara Falls to Youngstown and back. And additionally, the REDC has invested in the Niagara Wine Trail, which attracts visitors both within and outside the region to this growing industry in Niagara County. But none of these successes offsets the fact that so many businesses along Lake Ontario, the marinas, the charter boat businesses, restaurants, bars, and hotels, are suffering today, reliant on the same body of water that is now severely undermining their livelihoods. This blow comes right at the peak summer season for tourism businesses, which begins Memorial Day weekend. And even as these businesses are dealing with painful short-term losses, they know the long-term impacts could be even worse. I oversaw New York and New Jersey's recovery from Sandy as a regional administrator for HUD. And I heard again and again from mayors, town supervisors, and county executives who had suffered through the 1-2 punch of Irene and Sandy that to keep rebuilding what was there before was to throw good money at bad. Your regions are not alone in having to face this truth. And there are lessons we can learn from places around New York, but also other places around the country that have been devastated 2, 3, even 4 times. Places like North Carolina, like Texas, and the small tourist destination of Ellicott City, Maryland. These places have adopted forward-looking approaches to mitigate their vulnerable waterfronts so that they can prevent future devastation rather than having to keep rebuilding. We hope today will be the beginning of a process to do the same here, together on Lake Ontario. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hogan.
Good morning. You just heard from the Dream Team. I hope that you feel confident in the future plans that we will undertake, and certainly when we leave here today, there will be a blueprint. We will move forward. But I need you to know that I represent the entire state of New York as a partner of our governor, but this is deeply personal. This is my home turf. I was very proud to represent 4 of these counties as a member of Congress. I'm a recreational boater. I live on one of the Great Lakes. This is my turf. And so it was with heavy heart that I went out to many of these communities at the request of the governor in 2017 and reached out to people in deep ways, walking in people's backyards and elderly couples struggling with trying to lift the weight of a sandbag, and I tried to help them as well. And they were in tears because that was the home they'd moved in when they were first married over 45 years ago, and they thought they'd be able to live there forever. Or when I went down to the marina and had a chance to talk to a small business owner who couldn't wait for the season to start, and then he was looking out and seeing the docks and the boats just devastated, and he knew the restaurant was never going to open this year. And my heart was breaking for these people. I didn't know what to tell them, but other than to tell them that they have a governor who cares deeply about their plight, and we will do everything we can to help bring you back. Little did we know that, yes, we help bring back communities. We work with our local partners, many of the supervisors and mayors and elected officials, because I was one of them. I know how hard it is. I know how deeply you feel about your constituents. And you work closely with our state partners, our allies, our friends in the chambers of commerce. We all pulled together 2 years ago and thought we were going to be okay. And then, what we've experienced thus far forebodes a very challenging summer for these individuals that we care so much about. And that is why I've been in government a long time, and I've never seen an undertaking like Governor Cuomo is announcing here today that is so comprehensive in scope. It is so bold, it is so audacious, that I hope that brings hope and confidence to the people that we all represent out in these communities. They have to know that we have their backs, and we will not leave any stone unturned. And we will find creative solutions from individuals who've committed themselves to public service, these outstanding commissioners, the ones you heard from and the rest. Because our governor commands that we rise to this occasion, just as he said our forefathers have done in the past, our past leaders. And I believe that history will judge us as favorably as they can, because there's certain things in life we cannot control. But we are using every ounce of power, authority, resources, and preparation at our disposal here in state government to mitigate, but also to rebuild. And I don't know if anyone in this room is as old as I am, maybe a couple of you, but there used to be a TV show called The $6 Million Man. And the opening promo was, we can rebuild him. We can make him stronger, faster, better. Well, today, Rob Mujica is the $300 million man. And thank you, Rob, for the resources to make sure that these communities will have everything they need. And our partners in federal government, with Joe Morelli, like a pit bull, because he knows these communities personally. He'll be out there fighting, working with our elected officials, the president, the IJC, and demanding that they change course, because what they've been doing is not working for us. And we are proud to be home to 2 Great Lakes in this state. And we feel we have a special responsibility to be stewards of not just those bodies of water, make sure that they're clean and fresh for generations to come, but the people who've made these communities their homes, and the business owners who've invested their livelihoods. These are the people we don't want to find out gave up and left because they couldn't make a living here. They didn't have support. These are the ones we're fighting for and will continue to protect. So as you can tell, I'm energized. I'm fired up about this mission. It is a big undertaking. And as again, no other community, no other state has decided they're going to undertake protecting 400 miles of shoreline. But you'll be able to walk out of here today and say, I was part of a big, bold project that is helping to change the course of history, protect people's homes and livelihood, and perhaps even save lives. That's what we do best in government, and it all started here today.